Welcome to our Hangout series, Innovation by Design, which is designed for innovation, design thinking, and IoT leaders to share what's working for them, as well as the tips that can make others more successful. Today, our Hangout topic is let's talk about innovation strategies. Hopefully that's what you're here to hear about. Okay? Over the next hour, our innovation and IoT design experts will chat about how companies can develop their vision, create an innovation strategy, and execute its implementation. Innovation's hard, but we know that we all need to do it if we're going to stay relevant in this tough marketplace. Now, let me go ahead and introduce the panelists so you can then hear from them. First, we have Dave Braverman. Hey, Dave.
Hello.
Welcome. He is Senior Digital Product Manager at Stanley Black Decker. Dave's focused on helping the 174-year-old S&P 500 company extend its leadership in mechanical electrical products to those products that take full advantage of emerging Internet of Things, or IoT. In his current role, Dave defines success as connecting previously unconnected products and developing exceptional digital solutions that drive productivity and efficiency across a wide variety of industries for customers around the globe. And I think I was using your tools to get through the hurricane, the snowstorm, the blizzards, cutting down trees, in fact, as a matter of fact, Dave.
Awesome.
JP, welcome, JP. We have JP Abello. He's judge for the CES Innovation Awards, which has 5 categories. And he's also a judge for the Emmy Awards for Interactive Media. JP, you clearly get around into the right areas. JP was most recently an IoT thought leader, strategist, and innovator at Nielsen, and he founded the W3C Web Advertising Business Group and co-chaired the IoT Consortium Privacy and Security Task Force. He's also an advisor for both IoT and the AI world. It's great to have you back, JP.
Good to be here.
And Courtney Rowan is Director of Strategy at Altitude. So yes,
hey, everyone.
We're together. Hey, Courtney.
Hi there.
She leads Altitude's strategy practice, which includes helping companies manage their people through large-scale organizational changes. She helps companies achieve growth through human-centered innovation and product portfolio planning. She has over 15 years of experience in strategy, business innovation, and change management. And I'm Gretchen Hoffman, VP of Marketing at Altitude. My role today is as the moderator to make sure you hear just what you're wanting to hear today, or anything that is relevant to the topic. And Altitude is a design and innovation consulting firm based in Boston. It was acquired by Accenture's Product Innovation Group last year. Clients include Under Armour, Nike, Thermo Scientific, to name a few. Now let's get into the panel dialogue. And again, as a reminder, the topic today, it's let's talk about innovation strategies. So to set the stage, because we are tying with that topic, let's first really talk about innovation strategies from the standpoint of what is it. So there's marketing strategies, there's email strategies, design thinking strategies, but the one that's often overlooked in companies can be innovation strategy. So I'd love to hear from the panelists, each of them, to define innovation strategy. And Dave, if you'd be willing to start, that would be great.
Sure. So for us, when we're talking about innovation strategy, we're looking at it in several different ways. We look at it as incremental product and innovation within existing products and how to continue to have them lead in their individual markets. We look at disruptive or breakthrough innovation. So those would be adjacent markets or new products into new markets. And what we're trying to do is look at not just products, but also business models, services, even internal innovation internally, with the way that we go about doing things and running our business. And so for us, when we talk about innovation strategy, what we're saying is it encompasses the today, the tomorrow, internal, external products and services. And we're looking for that diversity in thought and diversity in ideas to help us drive and stay competitive and industry leading.
Great. Courtney, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, I would echo a lot of what David said. And when we think about innovation strategy here at Altitude, we really think of it as part of a company's overall growth strategy. So companies can grow in a variety of ways, right? Through acquisitions, expanding into different geographies. Innovation strategy is another way that companies look at how to grow, whether that's growing their product portfolio, like David said, or getting into adjacent markets. So here, the work that we try to do is really help have that lens on when we're thinking about how can we help companies grow through innovation and expand beyond their core. And how much or how fast they want to go beyond their core is something that we align with clients on. But it's really anything that goes beyond their core or expansion on their core through new products.
Excellent. Well, those are great definitions, JP. I don't know if you have anything additional you want to add to it, or you agree?
Sure, I agree with everything I heard. So from my point of view, by the way, just have Nielsen, so my views are only mine, not those of Nielsen. And I've worked with multiple companies before, always in the innovation field and always in product development for the consumer space. So the way I look at it for consumers, it's really all about creating value for consumers and for the company in the way that reduces costs and also makes people love the products that they create, that the companies create for them. So it can be a technological innovation, it can also be a business model innovation. It's all about really about making new products available to consumers at a much lower cost that are much better than what they had before.
Great. Now that we've defined it, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, one other clarification that I wanted to add, I think that's important. Innovation is not invention. That there's inventions, and that's something different than innovation. And sometimes those can get confused internally, that an invention can be an innovation, but there are plenty of other innovations that are not based upon a new invention.
That's a great point.
I think that's a great point. And I would also build on what the other participants have said, is usually an innovation strategy does encompass a new sort of business model strategy with it. Because as we're creating something new, we need to think about how that impacts the business and whether there's the right strategy in place from a business perspective.
And I would add to it that I agree that it's not always about invention. In fact, I think most of the time it's just connecting the dots between existing technologies, bringing fields that used to be apart and combining them in new ways. The beautiful thing about that is that the number of combinations is really huge. It's much bigger in number of technologies available. So you can innovate in multiple ways, in multiple directions. The limit is the imagination, really.
Yeah, so true. Well, now that we've defined innovation strategy and what we're going to talk about today, Courtney, maybe you could give us, talk to us a little bit about how companies can improve their innovation strategy and ways they do this. Sure.
I think some of the companies that I've seen most successfully engage in innovation strategies understand that, like David said, innovation is not just an idea or an invention, but in order to really be able to harness the best innovation capability or strategy is to go deep into their market and get a fundamental understanding of their customers. What are their customers' needs? What are their customers' jobs to be done? Not just in relation to their product, but surrounding their product and their challenges in their day-to-day jobs. Because it's in that deeper and broader understanding of your customers that you often find insights that you might not have expected or that you might not see through focus groups or by shop-alongs in retail stores or by sitting in the boardroom talking about ideas. So that's one of the things that's really important. The other thing I've seen companies do very well on innovation strategy is when they have dedicated resources. When it's not just a person's collateral duty, but there are a dedicated team that is slightly separate from the core business, but also connected in a way that they understand what innovation would resonate with the business. That's really important. When you try to have organizations with people in dual roles, one with the core business and one with innovation, that's very tricky. I would say the third thing I've seen successful companies do is have a lot of alignment between what the leadership, the CEO, the CFO, and the innovation team, what alignment around what innovation means for that organization. And I'll give one example of a client where it didn't work so well when a CEO had one vision of what innovation meant to him, and the innovation team had a more broader vision. Their vision was, how do we get into new markets? How do we add new value to our customers in different ways? And when they presented the innovation strategy to the CEO, he loved it, but his idea of innovation was, what is the next sexy product that we're going to make in the short term? And so because of that, there was a lack of action. They hadn't aligned on what innovation meant internally.
Yeah, great point. Dave, are there any specific practices maybe you want to add that you've seen companies do that drives more innovation?
Absolutely. Internally, I would say that Stanley Black Decker is one of the companies that you may not initially think of as being a hugely innovative company. But in fact, I've been here now for about 3 years. And as you mentioned, we're about 148, 150 years old. And there are, I'd say, at least 4 or 5 different ways that we focus on innovation. And that would be for, let's say, the 55,000 employees that we have. There's an internal portal that every month a business unit runs a problem that they've been trying to solve. And there's a contest to submit ideas and also take it even past ideas if you wanted to, because we are a company of, we're very fortunate to have physical and electrical engineers and industrial designers. And we also have access to maker spaces and of course, lots of tools. They make prototypes and they take it even further. And there's been some amazing innovations that have come out of every person, or come out of this crowdsourcing of all the internal. We also support and have dedicated teams, just like Courtney mentioned, that we have teams that are wholly focused on innovation, both that are part of the business units and then also that are slightly separate from the business units, and it's about the collaboration. So internally, there are the dedicated teams, there's contests. Externally, I've seen some really good, I love what Lego did. There's lots of different case studies on Lego, and externally, Lego saw what college students, I believe it was MIT, but I could be wrong, on the school, what they were doing and taking Legos and starting to build some robotics with it. And so Lego just embraced that and started working with the university and started to develop new products out of that. And then they took it even further, and I believe it's called Lego Mindstorm, but they took it even further, and they just kept going down that path of allowing these external people to start to innovate off of their platform, which is something that's really hard for larger growth companies to be able to accept, is that loss of pure control and trust that the market knows what they will do. And so you have some regulations, but it really opens up a lot of opportunities when you do that. And that could include opening some APIs and allowing controlled APIs access to things that you historically may not have wanted to give access to. So in my case, I have worked in both very large companies, and I've done 4 startups. And in startup, innovation is in the blood. It happens. That's why the company exists, because it's innovating, it's creating something new. In big companies, what I have an R&D group innovation team that plants the seeds and makes them grow into POCs, into prototypes. And often that kind of goes nowhere. That kind of just dies. And so it's critical in very big companies to have executive support from the top. The top needs to support innovation and ultimately picks which seeds will grow into fruit. So that means it needs to be a very smooth handover into production, into marketing, into a go-to-market. If these are not there, innovation can just suffocate inside big companies. And some companies that do that very well are Apple, for example.
We have a culture of innovation and afraid of disrupting the existing product lines when they see that there's something new that can simplify the life for their customers, make their experience much simpler. So it needs to be a culture in a company. It needs to come from the top.
Yeah, they definitely insist on it across the organization as opposed to I think, Courtney, you mentioned as opposed to just one group, right?
Yep.
I mean, you need a dedicated team, but you need them more as facilitators so that across the organization, people are trying to innovate and not just invent, right, Dave? So,
right.
No, I think really, really good points. So you've already talked somewhat about some of the key challenges that companies are facing when they're implementing effective innovation strategy. But Courtney, can you just jump in and talk a little more about some of the challenges and how do they overcome them?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges that we've seen is, especially working with larger companies, is trying to balance patience with urgency. Oftentimes, organizations will just want to get to the innovation and want to see the results from that. But in the work that we do in getting to a broader, more disruptive innovation strategy, we often have to go slow in the beginning to be able to go fast. So what I mean by that is we often have to go deep and really understand the customers and what their needs are, as I talked about before, and then spend time understanding what that means for the potential opportunity and for the business. So I think balancing that patience to do the research that needs to be done with the urgency to get something new out there in the market is something that organizations struggle. And it takes a leader that understands that they need to have some of that patience to get to the right place. I think also one of the challenges is, in general, in business, failure usually is not tolerated, usually in the core business, and it's pretty much the exact opposite in innovation. That what gets in the way sometimes is when leaders see failure from the innovation team as unacceptable. Failure is part of the process, and it's often what gets companies to a better place. We're working with a company right now, for example, that had an idea for a product that they generated internally, and they started to try to get it out into the market, and they realized it wasn't going to work, that the customers didn't want it, that it kind of was dying on the vine. And so that was seen as a failure. So they stepped back. That's when they pulled us in and said, okay, we have to understand why we're building this new thing. What is the reason? What do customers care about? And once we understand why we're going forward with this new innovation, then it will make more sense for everyone and will resonate more with the customers. I guess the third thing I would also say is that, kind of reiterating some of my other points, is that sometimes companies think of some of the bigger companies think of innovation as kind of a side project, that you can do it sort of on the side, but you can't really be half pregnant. You can't do innovation halfway. You got to be all in, and you've got to be committed to a multi-year process.
So, Courtney, I completely agree with everything you said, and I think that also means that innovation cannot be outsourced. It's a core competency in the company. It's not something you can send to offshore at lower cost. This is something that has to be internal, and it's because it's a learning process. By failing multiple times, that's how you get to a success. You have to learn the lessons, you have to keep inside, and you have to build on what you have learned to eventually have a successful product. And even often the first iteration of the product that ships is not the right one. Often you get to a good enough product only at version 2.0, 3.0, even 4.0. I mean, look at Android when it first launched. It wasn't a great OS, but over time it became a great OS.
It's interesting, JP, you say you have to keep it all internal, but we found from a lot of our clients, and Courtney, you could jump in, and I've actually heard on a lot of the hangouts that you use internal and external resources. So you're absolutely right. You have to have internal people that are champions, particularly at the executive level, and you need a dedicated innovation team, as we've said. But you also may not have all those skills, particularly as we've got all these new technologies with AR and AI and IoT and all coming on board. You still may need to bring on external resources.
So,
and I don't say that self-serving because we're an agency. I say that more, well, I guess maybe I do, but no, but I mean, it's also, it's important that we have seen that perspective also, that we can help get people ramped up. I mean, Beth at Simmons was on one of the other hangouts and she said, look, you know what? They're one of our clients, right? And she said, look, Altitude knows that they're helping to train us so we can grow more internal skills, but we don't have them right now, right?
So
I think that's important too.
I think it depends on the type of products that you're making. If you're in the hardware business and you need, for example, to add a solar panel to it, you might not have the best experts in your company. So you're going to go outside and bring the best experts. And once you have them, you're likely to keep them for a long time. You don't need to make a lot of improvements or power management or things like that, or chips. I mean, that's why they buy the CPUs from Intel and other companies that don't make their own. But when you're talking about software, you're talking about ideas. And everybody has different ideas. And if you outsource an idea and you bring it back in, it's not your idea anymore. It's very hard to manage it and evolve it. So your ideas have to grow within the company. It's all about keeping the ideas internal. But the specialties can be outsourced if it's just.
Yeah, I would add to that too, that I think in this whole idea of outsourcing, I think, our model at Altitude, Gretchen, is very much to be a partner and a part of the client team, right? So when we go out and understand their customers, we're with the client. So we feel like we're learning with them and transferring knowledge, but the internal knowledge that they have is critical to their success. We're not going to go out in isolation in a silo and figure this out for them and then hand them the solution. They have to be a part of the process with us.
Yeah,
So
great
I wasn't thinking of management consulting in this case. I was thinking really of coding. If you have a great engineer, you won't write code, and nobody likes to maintain somebody else's code, software code. So how you get from good to great is you keep the same engineers and you keep them innovating on top of what they've already built, because an idea that is nascent only becomes great with a lot of effort and a lot of iteration, and that is not something you can spread across multiple teams.
Yeah,
right.
No, absolutely true. Absolutely true. So.
And if I could just add one other perspective in, it's also the challenging. Sometimes you do develop this internal blinders, right? The longer that certain people sit in their respective seats, if you will, and the longer you've been at the company, unintentional, most of the time it's an unintentional bias, but you just have these foundational assumptions of the way things need to be. And sometimes it does take somebody from, whether it's an outside agency or whether it's some fresh new hires, to just challenge and ask those questions and to not just accept the first answer. Because what was true 5 years ago, what was true 3 years ago may not be true today. And I think that's one of the benefits of sometimes getting some fresh insight, is that ability that, I guess, why didn't we think of that? Why didn't we, we would have never even taken that step back to ask.
So there's really two types of innovation. There's continuous innovation, where you make a product grow from seed to good to great. And that, I think, has to stay typically with the same teams with some input from the outside, but they're the ones who grow the tree. Then disruptive innovation, where it comes completely from the outside, from another part of the company, which is why very large companies have multiple innovation teams, because ideas tend to come from other groups sometimes, and they compete with each other.
And I also, spot on, and I did want to just take one step back also and address the failures. And JP, you mentioned it, that they're learnings, and it sounds like it's that just semantics, but it really is a perspective of the way you look at things, that failures are the opportunity to pivot because you've learned something new. And even if it's the end of one and it's the start of a separate initiative, the reason why you got to where you got to was because you took those missteps initially. And I think a lot of people can look at their lives and their careers and say, at the time I thought this was really bad, but it actually ended up being a stepping stone for something over here. And that's the same in corporations, and a lot of times people reference these really big companies for doing amazing innovations like Apple or Amazon. And one of the things we'll try and remember and talk about is, well, Amazon had the Fire phone. That was a massive failure and disappointment for them, but that didn't let them, they didn't stop making other things, and the Android tablets that they make actually do pretty well, the Kindle Fires. And Apple, if we remember when Apple first put its own Maps product out, it was, I mean, just ridiculed for its first Maps product, but it still developed. It didn't give up and say, fine, we're just not going to do it. They still moved forward, and they took it and they learned and they made iterations. And I think that's really, really key in the whole innovation space, is to say, this isn't what we thought. This isn't what I wanted to have happen, but let's see the positive. What did we learn, and how can we move forward from here doing something different?
So Edison was famous for saying that when he failed 1,000 times to create a light bulb until he found the right one, he said he didn't fail. He just learned 1,000 ways to not make a light bulb.
Exactly.
So I think there's also a difference in cultures between East Coast and West Coast companies and how they approach innovation. In the East Coast, you're expected, in most companies, probably all of them except maybe Apple, to put out improved products and get feedback from consumers. You can constantly improve. Google is famous for relaunching this beta culture. Everything is in beta, nothing gets to 1.0. On the East Coast culture, maybe in Europe too, there's a tendency to let's wait until we have something really polished, something we can be proud of, something that will not tarnish our image, much more image conscious. And Apple has adopted that philosophy too. It's very unique in the Valley in that respect. We try to emulate more of the luxury brands of Europe and Asia. They want to make sure that their 1.0 product is really amazing. It's very impressive. So the company needs to decide its strategy, which approach it wants to take. Does it want to be viewed as a luxury brand, puts out quality from the start, or a company that is constantly trying a lot of things and constantly tweaking on the go?
Yeah. And that goes very much to Courtney's point earlier of understanding your customers, because the customer that may end up being your cash cow for a product most likely isn't going to be your customer without that first iteration. That you'll be tailoring that first iteration to get learnings for certain elements of it, knowing that these are the early adopters. And I think even, Apple has done a really good job with, there's a lot of people that just want the first iteration of their product, but there's also a lot of people that will never buy the first iteration of their new product. And they have very different market segments, even within their own, if you will, market niche of folks that love Apple over other products. And I think getting in and understanding your customers, and then making that decision to say, okay, we're not building something for everybody right now. We're going to be building this for this specific audience, maybe in this specific area or region, or however you want to, wall it off. And we're going to learn from that and move it out. And, I think Facebook is probably the most popular case of that, right? Started at one college, then went to all colleges, then opened up, then went to multi-generational. But Zuckerberg, and whether you believe or not believe, the Winklevoss twins did not have the vision of what the platform is today. Not anything close. It started with something very, very, very different for them.
Yeah. Well, those are great points. Let's shift for a minute. We've talked about iteration. So Courtney, can you jump in and talk a little bit about, we're talking iterating, like how do you learn? How do you keep doing the continuous innovation that JP referenced? So how do you incorporate the research or design thinking into your innovation strategy?
Yeah, so I think when we think about incorporating the research and design thinking for us is all about building increasing levels of confidence. And like JP said, some companies need more confidence before launch than others. West Coast is different. A hardware company probably needs more confidence than a software company at launch. But we try to work with companies to go from, a structured process to go from I don't even know what I'm going to make or what the next innovation is going to be, to slowly defining the opportunity through research, through understanding the customers, through understanding their needs, defining the opportunity and then putting shape around that opportunity. So using the design thinking process to understand the needs, brainstorm ideas and potential paths and directions that this can go in, and then go back to customers and try to narrow down even more and focus on, okay, what makes sense in the market, and then start to think about what would this look like from a product perspective, put shape around that, and what would this look like for the business. So it's a very structured process to get to higher levels of confidence that this innovation strategy or this product strategy is right for the customer and for the business.
So I had a thought here. When it comes to understanding customers and doing market research, when you talk to customers and ask them what they want, what they think, typically their views are influenced by the media, by sci-fi movies, by basically what they see on TV, what they read in the news. These productions are there to inspire a vision of the future, and that tends to influence what people ask for. That's why we're working on self-driving cars today, because it's been in the movies for a while, flying cars, all these things. Other approach, and Steve Jobs made that popular, that says that customers do not know what they want. This is when you think outside of the mainstream. You create things that nobody thought about, no movies ever pictured. That comes from instinct and from putting yourself in the shoes of the end user. So you start being the user of the product that you create before it ships. In fact, you create the product that you always wanted to create for yourself. You want to be the first user of that. Very, very best products are the ones that people create for themselves. We have an internal yearning for having it done. And that yearning often comes from the leader of the company, of the startup. There's a unmet need to create a new product category nobody's working on, and these are people who go out and put them out, and if nobody's using them, if there's no customers for that, at least they are themselves, and if they make themselves happy, typically other people like them, and that's how I think new markets are created from scratch.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think part of the importance of the research here is exactly what you said, JP, not to go out and say, okay, so what do you think of this product? What do you need? Because to your point, they don't really know what they need. But to watch them, to observe them interacting with the product. What are they doing before they interact with the product? What are they doing as they interact with the product? What workarounds are they doing with their products? Or are there things that they're trying to sort of hack with the product to make it better? And then what are they doing after the interaction with the product? So to see them in their context, interacting with the things that we care about, and then probing questions. Why did you do that? Why did you sort of build this workaround for the product? What's not working? But not to ask them directly, what do you think about this product?
So this goes.
That's where
that's actually the concept of A/B testing in the software business, where you present different versions of the same product to different customers and see how they react. And that helps basically eliminate biases that you might have a designer, because now users, you can see how they use the versions and see which ones he's doing the best.
Yeah. I would also add that during the research, one of the things that's helpful is if we go in there without thinking about solutions or without having any preconceived hypotheses, just observing, just watching, just listening, and following where the customer goes, not necessarily where we want them to go. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, that's where we come back and just see the data and look at what people are saying and look at what people are doing. And that's when we start generating ideas and concepts.
Yeah. Great points. Thank you very much for the insights. For the folks listening in, just as a reminder, we'd love to engage with you on Twitter at altitude_Inc. Also, remember that we have Ask a Question tab. So if you have any questions for our panelists, we will do about 10 to 15 minutes more of dialogue, and then we will take your questions. Be sure to vote for the ones you want to make sure we get to, although we'll try to get to all of them. Okay, please don't put them in the chat. If you can put them in Ask a Question, that would be much more helpful to make sure we get to them. All right, so let's keep rolling here with a little more lively dialogue. I'm going to move to JP. If you could give some examples of companies with good innovation strategies, and I think we've already heard some, if there's maybe a few others that you want to give, but really talk about why are they working?
Yeah, I think Apple is what I mentioned before, and I think they're doing well because we have a vision at the top, which is to simplify the life of their users. We want to create the simplest possible experience. So you cannot drive approach to innovation, and we're not afraid of replacing good products with what they think are even better ones. But there's also other companies like Tesla, for example, which I very much admire. Their aim is really in improving life for humanity. And they want to create completely new markets that people or the competitors don't believe can be done. And they have a driving mission. So I think the mission really is at the core of really great companies that do innovation.
Okay. Let's do a shift here now. Let's talk about people skills. I know a question comes up oftentimes is, how do you have the right people? I mean, we've had this conversation already that you need internal, external resources. Potentially, JP's mentioned at times with software, you're coding, it's internal. But I'd love to hear a little bit more in terms of, what does it take? Innovation strategist. What are some of the traits, characteristics? Dave, maybe you could jump in here.
Sure. I think one of the core traits is honestly being a storyteller, painting that vision of what the future could be like, what the experience, how that solves, and touching the emotions. The financials for a lot of companies drive forward, but then they also become a lot of scrutiny, and the demands for immediate revenue start to overtake, and the product that you envisioned or the innovation that you envisioned just gets whittled down. So I think this ability to tell stories is key. Also, someone who will challenge and just not accept the first negative response, and can go about different ways of pushing forward this mindset of innovation and why it's important. And I'd say probably the third biggest trait is someone with a change management mindset, because a lot of times that's what's really important, is you are trying to change the status quo, and there are some very specific and well-researched practices and approaches to how you can work through change management within an organization. And an org change, where a lot of people typically think of it, but it's definitely a change. So that storytelling, that ability to really believe and not just take the first no, and that ability to help reinforce these change management principles, I think, are all really key in the folks that you're going to rely on to help bring innovation throughout your organization.
Excellent. JP, do you have anything you want to add?
Sure. So from my one of the part of base qualities is to be able to be both a broad thinker and to go down into details. You need to have both ends of the spectrum. By broad thinker, it means to be able to think across disciplines and look in areas that other people are not looking in, and then not be afraid to reuse old ideas that might have been shelved because they were ahead of their time or in the wrong field. For example, when I was at Yahoo working on the Smart TV platform, there was an internal product called Yahoo Widgets, which had been launched on desktop, but was not doing well and was going to be shelved. Instead of throwing it away, we took that and we modified it to become a TV OS, so you could run apps, small apps on TV, launched a whole field of Smart TV, and in the end we won an Emmy Award in 2011 for that. So if we did not look around to work on other screens, we would not have achieved that level of success.
I still have a TV that has Yahoo Widgets, just so you know.
Oh, that was a product.
I have an older Samsung. It's a Samsung.
Okay, Samsung.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Courtney, do you have any additional points you want to add on that? Or
I mean, I would really echo what David was talking about with storytelling. I think that a critical piece is being able to have empathy, because when you do go out into the field and talk to customers, you really want to step into their shoes. You want to feel what it's like to be them doing their job. and to be able to absorb that when you're with them. And then we really, I think that a good strategist is a good translator of what the customer's needs and priorities are. So translating everything we heard and the patterns that we're starting to see across customers into a cohesive and simple story. And I always say that it's easier to storytell by translating through the customer's lens than from my own point of view, because it's irrefutable. It's what the customers are saying. And as long as you can do that in a simple and cohesive manner, it can be more easily adopted across the organization and socialized across the organizations.
Okay, excellent. So Courtney, if someone is just setting out to ramp up their innovation efforts, let's do a shift here as we start to wrap up here. Or if they want to review if they have the right innovation strategy, what are the first steps that they should take to develop or refine the innovation strategy that they have or are going to have?
I think it comes back to a lot of the things that we've talked about in the beginning. Make sure that you set up the organization for success. The leadership is on board. There's a separate team that is committed and fully resourced to be able to commit the time and the effort to go deep into the field and talk to your customers, to be able to make sure that the organizational ambitions are all aligned. Everyone's on the same page of what you're trying to achieve. And to try to shed some of the internal biases or internal language that you're used to using and try to adopt new languages or new ways of seeing things when you're trying to think of what's next.
Yeah, I would add in, know that you're going to hit the time where, as some may call it, the internal organization antibodies are going to try and kick out this new thought, new product, new service, new business model, because it is not what it's used to. And that it's going to happen, and don't get discouraged by it. Just embrace it, knowing that that's what's going to happen, and work through it. It's a little, similar to being sick, right? Your body is fighting it, and then it starts to build the immunity to those antibodies over time. And that's the way that a lot of innovation makes it through really large companies, is to not just give up when they hit that time, but to remember that, okay, this is just going against what the core organization is trying to do, which is optimize their operations and maximize revenue. And this is disrupting that flow. So you need to embrace that. And the other thing I didn't mention on the last question I think is really important is understanding the commercialization of an innovation, which goes back to other conversations we had earlier.
Great. Hey, Dave, while you're talking about this, what would be great is, are there any tips or models that you recommend for people that are trying to drive these strategies at their companies that are either fail-proof or not?
I don't think anything's fail-proof. I do think some of the tips when you're doing storytelling, there's so many different services and creative types out there that can help you with the storytelling, whether it's using software to create animations, or whether you have designers help you with clickable prototypes to have someone walk through, or whether you have someone write things in a comic book kind of style. But just, I think getting and hitting the emotions of folks to understand and really see the vision of the future is one of those tips. So use the tools and services that are out there for that. And I would say, another thing that we've seen that has been successful is to not ignore the monetization angle completely, to make sure you're hitting that on the head. Whether that's, we need time to monetize. If it's something based on the network effect, then clearly state, look, you have to go through the education and the adoption before you're going to make the money. But if you try and dodge it, that's always going to be in the back of the mind, because ultimately corporations are to make money. But at times, especially with some new innovations and some of the business models that are really taking hold now, you'll see that revenue is delayed. There's this trailing effect where the monetization will come after the value is created, where in like our world with a physical product, we make a product, sell a product. But in a lot of the innovations that we're looking at and tried, it's not make a product, sell a product. It's, help enable a solution, build the community, and then monetize. But don't ignore it.
Yeah, very good point. Thank you very much to the panelists. Let the folks listening in know what's going to happen next, because I do want to make sure we're getting to your questions. So what we are going to do is we're going to have each of the panelists just do a quick wrap, and then we will jump into your questions. I also, though, first want to let you guys know, remember to visit our website, www.altitudeinc.com. There's a lot of free and valuable resources under the Insights tab, and our case studies are under work. I would love to have you take a look at those. There's also all of the Innovation by Design Hangout series under the Insights tab. And in April, we'll have Let's Talk organizations, where innovation is at the heart with Allegion and GE. So I encourage you to look for our invite on that next week. And very, very much appreciate all the insights from the panelists. So here's what we'd like to do is I'd like to have each panelist to go around and share just top 2 takeaways that they suggest the audience remember from this dialogue. And of course, to the audience, we hope you remember everything, but it's always helpful to have a wrap to remember a couple of the top tips. So JP, let's pull you back in here, and why don't you start?
Yeah, so I think one of the things to expect when you innovate and create new products is that there will be a curve. There will be a curve of growth and adoption where we reach at some point the maximum potential for the new idea. And then unfortunately, over time, as more and more people get involved, contribute to it, the original idea gets kind of more blurry, and the product becomes over-designed and kind of starts going to decline. So there will be a cycle in technology products, and we see that all the time in Silicon Valley, where maybe on average it's probably 5 years, where innovation reaches its peak and then starts to decline, is replaced by something else that's even better, that somebody else has thought about, that provides even more value and simplifies even more the experience for the end user. And to be ready to for this evolution, you need to be able to think across disciplines, to connect the dots, and always be on the outlook for something that somebody else has done before that could be reused in the context of what you're working on.
Great, thank you for those. And Dave?
So I think if I had to sum up 2 big takeaways, one would definitely be that innovation is not invention. It can encompass that, but that there are plenty of types of innovation that can occur in a company that don't involve inventing a new product. And then I also would say that we talked a lot about internal and external folks working on innovation. And I think accepting that innovation doesn't occur 100% for your company. You can't outsource it completely and just expect someone to bring in, but also that innovation to occur completely 100% within your company is key. I think it's understanding that it can come from lots of different places and may even involve other companies, and creating utilizing the vast network of startups that are out there and partners that you can create to make some really amazing innovations. So those are probably the 2 biggest takeaways for me.
Courtney?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I really like the points that the panelists have made around innovation being an iterative process. So, that first product that goes out into the market might not be the thing that is still there in a year or 2 years, but that doesn't take away from the fact that it's a valuable piece of the stage of the broader innovation. And the other point that I think has resonated for me today is as we think about innovation, not invention, but innovation itself, it's really important for the organization to understand what that long-term sort of business modeling will look like. so that they can gain the confidence that this is something they want to invest in the long term, and that they've thought through the strategy for launch, whether it's acceptable not to make money in the first year or two. Those are conversations that the companies need to have, and think about what that long-term ROI is going to be, because the rest of the business is going to care about that.
Yeah. Boy, I really have to thank our panelists. You've really provided absolutely valuable and, very practical insights for folks to listen to and think about as they're, evolving their innovation strategy. So I absolutely want to thank you, and I ask you to hang in for about 10 more minutes so we can jump into the questions. All right. Okay. So if it's easier for the panelists, just click on the Ask a Questions tab. What we'll do is go in order based on the most votes. And I will ask them. And what I'd ask is I'd have one panelist answer each one, just so that we can get through more of them. But if for some reason you are dying to say something else, you have a great value add, jump in and add. Okay. So the first one here from Julie, organizational design. How do you organize your company in terms of structure of governance, in terms of structure of teams, place in the organization, governance, resources to nurture the right innovation culture and behaviors? Can you recommend frameworks to better understand the possibilities? Anyone jump in?
I can jump in and say that as we think about designing an innovation team within a larger organization, it's really important for that innovation team to have direct communication channels to the leadership in the organization, and to also have the leadership not protect the team completely, but allow the team to operate outside of the scope of worrying about sort of the day-to-day P&L of the core business. Because once people around the innovation team start to perceive this innovation team is just sort of sucking the money out of the core business, that becomes a problem. So we need to sort of protect them from that, so that people in the organization are excited about having a team that's thinking about their future without being scared that they're sort of, sucking the blood dry from the rest of the organization. So strong leadership support, a little bit, separated from the company, but still connected enough to know whether the innovation is right for the organization.
Yeah, Courtney, thank you. And also Julie put a note here in the comments that she appreciates that answer, but also looking for frameworks, not design principles for organizational design. So I don't know if there's any additional thoughts.
What do you mean by frameworks? What do you mean by that?
Yeah,
I'm thinking it's models, right?
So yeah, when I read the comment from Julie, I think she can let us know if this is what she's thinking of. But there are a lot of different frameworks from like lean startup is a framework that you can use that talks about this iterative, more agile type of approach. And it depends some on whether you're a physical product company, a services company, or a physical and software or completely software-based company. I think different frameworks work for that. There's others, like there's one called the 3-box solution is another concept or framework that you can leverage. And then there's actually a lot of different I guess we can call them frameworks out on the web. I think there's one, I believe Adobe has what they've used internally, and they make it available for anyone to use, and it's their framework for how they drive innovation within their company. And I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's something like Red Box or something along that line. But if you search Adobe and innovation, it's a complete little kit, if you will, that helps, and that's their framework. So I think there are several, lots of different ones, and it's about finding the one that's right for you, but trying different ones.
Yeah.
Kickbox.
Okay.
Yeah. So somebody just typed it, Kickbox. Yeah.
I think is also this
Julie,
concept.
just to let you know, there will be on the next Hangout, we're going to be talking more about organizational models and things. So that might be helpful to drill down a little bit more into it. Okay. I'm going to go to the next question so we have time to answer some others. Okay, but Julie, I do believe you'll get more answers at the next hangout in April. All right, and what are some good examples of monetizing innovation to meaningfully improve business solutions?
So I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of digital business platforms, and by that I mean let's look at things like Uber, look at models like Apple with their App Store, Amazon with what they did, and it's this enabling a solution versus building a product to meet a need. A make it build it model is really good for a very specific purpose, but enabling the solution, enabling the demand side and the supply side offers many monetization opportunities, from things like Amazon taking a percentage of every interaction to actually selling sell a product model within the network or within the platform, to sponsorships for content, to e-commerce, other e-commerce opportunities, white labeling. There's a lot of different business models that work really well around a digital business platform. So I feel like that's one approach to monetizing innovation, is to look at it as from that perspective.
So I want to try that one of the biggest innovations of our generation was the invention of the web. Introduction of the web. And when the web was launched, when HTML was launched, web browsers were launched, it was never really the intention to make that into a commercial platform to share information and make it available to everyone around the world. But the industry eventually found a way to get someone to pay for these services, and that came in the form of advertising, and all of the services became free to everyone. And monetization innovation that happened on the web was critical for making that society-changing innovation become mainstream.
Excellent points. I'm going to jump to the next question so we can get into a few more. What is the biggest distinction between innovation and business as usual, and how can you convince senior leadership that these activities need separate resources? One comment I just want to let Christine know, who had put the question in. Our very first hangout was how do you sell design thinking innovation internally? So you can find that on the Insights tab if you'd like to listen to that. That might also give you some tips. That was with GE and LPL Financial, talked about how to do that. Okay, so anyone want to jump in and answer this?
I'd say, one of the biggest motivating factors to convince leaders to focus on this is by looking around at the competitive market, because right now competitors are moving extremely fast, and they're always thinking one step ahead. And if you start to look at, even in adjacent industries, how smaller organizations or more nimble organizations, more agile organizations are moving faster and leapfrogging some of the competitors, that poses, it lays out a story of there's a constant threat out there. Every company has a constant threat that their competitor, or even a new market entrant, is going to leapfrog them and come up with something tremendously new. And that fear of always needing to stay ahead is something that often sort of catches the attention of a lot of leaders and motivates them to want to invest in innovation. Now, the biggest challenge is usually having them invest enough in innovation, and having the patience to invest in enough innovation. But if you can start small and gain some quick wins, that's sometimes an easy way to sort of gain the confidence and the trust of leadership to allow you to expand into a larger investment in innovation.
Great. So the next question, what are some of the biggest surprises you encountered that you wish you knew before you started working on innovation strategies? Maybe someone wants to just pick a couple that you could think about? Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
JP.
I think there is one is this this kind of misconception that the hardest part in doing something is to build the product. In fact, it's not building it, it's maintaining it. Anybody can build a product, but to really make it great, you need to be committed to the long term and keep improving it until it becomes great. If you don't improve it, somebody else can come up with a gizmo that's slightly better and just makes you irrelevant. So it's the continuous improvement of your product. You need to commit to it for the long term. You don't just look at it, you constantly improve it. That's why the best sites, the best way businesses constantly improve their service and their website, or somebody else can come along and do a better job.
Yeah, excellent. So we'll do 2 more questions and then we'll need to call it a wrap. So what are your top 3 tools for innovation strategy design? Does anyone, or even just, does anyone have a couple tools you could suggest? I know, Dave, you had talked a little bit about it earlier.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if that's where that question was driving. Innovation strategy design.
Julie's almost stumped us twice, I think, or trying to understand the question. Julie, if you want to put a comment in the chat, I'm going to go to the next question to clarify, then we'll get back to it if you want.
So she just wrote the Horizon model. We at Stanley Black Decker do use that, and in fact, even going back to her first question, and we've set up our innovation strategy with Horizon 1, Horizon 2, and Horizon 3, where we have different groups that are focused on different horizons that are, especially H2 and H3, they're dedicated teams focused different business units specifically on those. So we do very much adopt that concept.
Okay. So I'm sorry that we can't get all the questions, but we're getting to all the ones with votes. So the last question, and then we'll call it a wrap. Other than enabling tech and language, what's really changed in innovation approach and strategy over time?
I think the agile model has been a big disruptor. The ability to iterate quickly, to work on stories. The evolution from waterfall model to this agile model has been a huge change in the last decade. Definitely. And even
brand loyalty.
Even the largest companies.
Oh, no, that pain.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, great points. Well, let's go ahead. It's top of the hour, a little past. So I want to thank the panelists very, very much for all the excellent insights and taking the time to share what your experience has been and what you're seeing out there. And I want to thank all the folks listening in for taking time out of your day. I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day. And thank you again for listening in. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.